name is Michael from Sioux Trading Post, and I'm going to try to show you how to do an applique stitch. This stitch is probably the one where you'll have the most freedom for your design when you're doing beadwork. It takes 2 needles and 2 threads, but you're not using them each at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're lucky enough to have some nice leather, I have a piece of brain tan here which is wonderful to bead on. That's great. You can use cloth, you can use felt. Felt is good because the edges don't ravel. If you're going to practice on, you can practice on any cloth. If you want to make the cloth heavier, if it's kind of flimsy, you can put some of that iron-on interfacing or Pellon on the back side and just sew right through it. That'll make it a little heftier. You start this stitch with a doubled thread. I have a black doubled thread here. And that is the thread that holds your beads. And I'm going to come up through this leather. And I unhooked one strand of the beads from the hank, and I'm just going to take some beads right off of it, which is the tidiest way to do it. You can do this with loose beads as well. You just have to put them in a bowl. If they're in a bowl, just imagine I have a bowl full of beads right here. All you have to do is just go like this, and your needle will become full of beads. Okay? So, the hardest part of this thing, and it was the hardest part for me anyway, when I started, was learning how to hold what I was beading on and how to hold my beads there, down onto that, and put them where I wanted to go. Basically then your second needle is, I'm using this kind of beige thread here, and this is a single thread. It's not doubled, it's just a single thread. They're all waxed with beeswax, by the way. That keeps your thread stronger, keeps it from tangling, and it provides a little bit of sticky surface for beads to stick to. It's kind of, plus it really smells good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now with this stitch, I'm holding it kind of with these 2 fingers and these 2 fingers is what's worked for me, okay? And I work this, usually I work away from myself. That's what I have found is easiest. That's another thing that you have to find for yourself. Whatever's, do it the easiest way that works and works well and looks the way you want it to look. I'm coming up right beside that row of beads, coming all the way up, and then I'm going right down across from it on the other side of the black thread, on the other side exactly across, and I'm coming down, and that goes all the way down, and that's there, then that stitch just is there. So I've started my stitching. And go about every 2 beads, 2 to 3 maybe. 2 is good. Okay, now I'm going to go down right there. I'm going all the way through the hide in this. Usually like with a lazy stitch technique, you'll just nick the hide. You won't go all the way through. You kind of need to go all the way through with this stitch. And you don't need to pull it tight. Now, you see, if you're not counting, the trouble with this stitch is knowing where you were. So, this time I'm going to do it like so. I'm going to go down right next to it. But I'm going to leave a little bit of the thread up, see, like that. Then I know where I was. So then I just go a couple of beads up from there, And when I pull it tight, pulling it through, will actually pull that last stitch tight. See, just like that. So then I'll know where I was. And then I can do the same thing for this one. You have to keep those beads down there. Keep this going. Sort of like that. I'm leaving that loop slightly up so I know where I was. And skip up another 2. This stitch is really good for making naturalistic designs. Your design scheme really opens up. One of the ways you can make patterns and follow a pattern is to have the pattern on a piece of paper. You can draw it, you can take a photocopy of something, and then in turn sew that pattern, base that piece of paper right down onto what you're sewing. Just baste it around, say if it was this piece of leather, and then just sew right through the paper and down all the way through, back up, down through the paper. It's almost like bead by number, and it's a real old technique. It's really, really traditional, and I don't know why I avoided doing it for so long, because once I started doing it, I realized what I'd been missing. It was just really a nice way to have a pattern. There's that. And I'm just going along here. Make sure you come up on one side and always go down on the other side. That's the easiest way to do this, is to have that continuity. Just maintain it. And then down there.
Do you prefer this stitch?
I do prefer this stitch mainly because I think it's real tidy. It makes all those stitches, it takes a little more stitching, so it takes a little bit longer, but all that stitching makes your beadwork really strong. It's really sewn down, so it's just really, it's stronger. It won't snag as easily as, say, you can catch maybe something on a bit of lazy stitch, or something's pointed or something, you can maybe snag it. And that won't happen as easily with this kind of stitch. And like I say, it really lends itself to any kind of design you want to do, just anything. This is the way this was done. And what was kind of noteworthy about it was that, North American Indian people, had used porcupine quills or moose hair. They've done handwork and embroidery, for long time. So the people who were involved in it had handwork skills, but they just kind of came up with this kind of thing on their own. And it was just a real time-honored European stitch as well, because obviously the beads came from Europe. But Indian people came up with this kind of on their own.
Does this work with both Italian and Czech beads?
Sure, any beads. As a matter of fact, that the Italian beads might be a little bit more suited, just because sometimes they have, what we call a charming irregularity. And some of those really oddly shaped beads you'll find will fit nicely into a little odd corner that you've created by your beading. And especially when you get to start to fill in with this. And you just do this row by row, and you can just pile another row next to it for filling in. And it just goes really smoothly. It's basically a really nice, after a while it gets real meditative. What you need to do is kind of rely on your stitch length. Don't count the beads. If you count these beads and get totally like compulsive about counting your stitch. Just rely on your stitch length. If you count, it's just not going to be fun. And beading should be kind of calming, kind of meditative, and entirely fun. So don't count. Leave that little stitch up there like I showed you so you know where you were. And then just go up, bump up to the next one. And snag it down. Snug it down, I should say. And we're doing it again. Okay. Almost at the end here of this particular little stretch. It's really nice. You know, other people developed, certain tribes had, you know, different beading styles, different, the techniques, the colors, the designs absolutely varied from region to region and from tribe to tribe within those regions. This stitch was used on the East Coast and up in the northern and plains as it went into the basin area and over to the coast. That was where the applique stitch was the most prevalent. And there you go. And that's just done, and then you can just tie off whatever you need to below, but see how that's just a nice tight row.
Do you
And
have
that's how
any?
you do it.
Do you have any examples of what this would look like as a finished product?
Okay, here's a really good one. This is copied. This was copied because somebody wanted this exact same bag, but this is a paper pattern. This shows you how you can bead over a paper pattern. In this case, it is literally bead by number. This was a crow belt bag that was on the cover of a gallery, a book of a gallery exhibit, and I think, I can't remember the name of the person, but this was a page of that book, and you see what I did. It was just two cowboys, and that's what the applique stitch can look like. And I believe I've got a little bag here that is not quite done. I just have to put the fringe on it that I made. And there's a moon going around. And when you are doing this, let me get my case out here. When you are doing this, when you go to fill in, I made the borders, and then I did the moon. But when you fill in, I did the outlines, and then when you fill in, you do it from the outside in. You don't do it from the inside out. Here you do the outside until you get to the middle. Sometimes you might have to turn the beads sideways and put them in individually. Just set them in individually just to fill up the space. On the other side is a little tornado. Mm-hmm. But it's just rows after row of applique. And in order to give it a little bit of depth, I beaded in the tornado separately. And it's hard to tell. It might be hard for you to tell through what we're filming here, but it does have a little bit of depth just because of the difference, because of the size of the beads are different, and this was set in separately. And then I just used a lazy stitch here, and that's just a wrapping stitch. As I stitched around the two pieces of leather, I just wrapped as I sewed that up. This is an edge beading technique at the top for a little bit of decoration as well. Wow. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you.